What is up, down, and sideways, all you beautiful individuals? It is another epi of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you fine folks for some more MSI action. I hope you enjoyed your 24-hour break because the rest of the tournament we are pedal to the metal, no breaks, every day, game action, round 2 in the bracket stage, and it's now, of course, elimination after elimination in a lot of these matchups, and they were close, Mark. The Oysters, they were right there. This series against the top seed from the LPL, honestly, obviously, all really came down to this incredibly back and forth game 2 that saw AL lose a 7K gold lead in one single team fight, only for them to miraculously defend their base twice to steal the game back.
And a pretty clear indication and quick reminder to a lot of professionals, a lot of regular people as well, that, hey, just because you're a hook champion doesn't mean that you operate the exact same way as Thresh, the main hook champion a lot of people associate or think of in all these things. Yeah, you got that option to go in if you've got someone on the Thresh hook. Not the same on Kaiwing's Nautilus. 2 times, I think there are fights that are started because of this one, because of the Nautilus going in and making a hook on someone, and it does not end well for the Oysters. Yes, this game too did see that miraculous, absolutely crazy team fight to have that deficit and be able to come back from this one for this Oysters. But man, oh man, this game too is the breaking point for me within this series. When you look at it and where you could have gone from here, from that point, having that one not go your way was crucial against the Oysters.
And there's probably no champion you could make a better montage of game losing or team fight losing hooks than on Nautilus. We've already had multiple at this MSI event, and there's a reason he's often the champion with the most deaths at a lot of these international events. But yeah, obviously, despite the heartbreaking Game 2 loss, because that team fight when they're down 7K really feels like the do or die moment in this series, because you fall down 2-0, you really don't like the odds or the chances of CFO getting back into this one. And despite losing in that fashion, they do bounce back in this third game, which Game 3 is just a straight up Doggo Ezreal highlight reel.
Oh man, was this ever the Doggo Ezreal highlight reel? And we've talked about him before. Again, like, probably 2-3 years ago at this point, talking about the Ezreal as well as some of these other hyper-mobile ADCs and seeing how he can really take it to that next level. I think he is one of the very best at it, and we're seeing it right here on the MSI stage, and you're seeing it against a squad like Anyone's Legend in that regard is one of the impressive things. I think there's a lot that we can talk about moving forward from this series for, both paths, but really, I think at the end of the day, it is crucial within a series, and then how the back and forth goes, that Oysters would have got that game too, because then you're not necessarily put against the wall. You have to go back to back with the wins to keep it going, because again, we've seen at this event a lot of times teams are able to go back. These really strong teams are able to go back into that room, listen to their coaching staff, get a couple of things, and get right back out there. And it's a different refocused effort from that team. And it's not enough to allow for these type of back-to-backs, get us to a Game 5 situation. You have to be within it, and especially when you have some disadvantages against you on the other side, when you're looking across the rift at the LPL champions in Anyone's Legend.
And let's face it, screenshot at the end of Game 4 looks like a complete stomp the way of AL. But CFO had a good early game, and they were very much in this game until all it takes is one really two very bad TP out of rest, defending a turret that's dying anyways, and the turret goes down, he gets caught, Kaiwing ends up dying as a result, and really it's those 2 kills and the turret are enough for AL to completely snowball this game out of control.
Yeah, and I think when you step away from this series, from this Game 4 at the end of it, you're going to be maybe a little bit bitter, a little bit disappointed if you are the Oysters, but I think it's still going to be that type of disappointment and bitterness where you are going to be refocused, re-engaged for your next opportunity to take that shot, as opposed to, and you're still feeling, angry or disappointed and depressed about it, whatever. I don't feel like that's going to be the reaction, given what you've seen, given what we heard from the CFO staff after an CTBC, excuse me. This certainly was the Oysters making their mark again on the international stage, and I think claiming their rightful spot amongst these teams that are right below the very best that we look at in the LPL and the LCK.
And especially so for, a couple of players. Genjia was the main reason they got back into this game too at any point, and this carry threat of Hongq and Doggo that we've been talking about all tournament, they probably still had the biggest highlight moments, the Corki game for Hongq and then the Ezreal for Doggo throughout this series, despite losing. So the main carries for this CFO squad far and away proved again in this series and the whole event that they're world class, despite only being 18 for Hongq and still relatively young for Doggo.
I'm pretty sure we've talked about this before, that Genjia is clearly someone that is deserving or available to fill a role or an opportunity within the LPL, the LCK, LEC, LTA, if you want to import all these type of things. He is that type of quality of a jungler where it is valuable and it is almost a surprise to see him. It's an extra little, you're looking through your Halloween candy bag. Oh, it's a full-size chocolate bar in there. It ain't one of the small ones. You got the real deal with Genjia, a bit of a steal for the region. And yes, Hongq, that is going to be the one to remember after this one. We already were talking a lot about him and feeling positive about his chances in the future, given first stand. Even more so now from this MSI tournament and how he has improved, how he has grown since that gap in time. Cannot wait to see him roll through this summer and hopefully get back out onto the world stage.
So it's only one round further, but you're feeling infinitely better about CFO's performance versus what we got out of the two LEC squads. And the AL side of things after this series now, this was the most LPL-esque series that we've seen out of AL since they were back in the domestic region, because it didn't matter if they were at a disadvantage or fully in control. They were taking every possible fight available to them throughout this series. And I mean, CFO were happy to oblige, sometimes to their detriment.
I think for anyone's legend, it was a clear indication of where they wanted to step, where they wanted to take that next leap after the loss to Gen.G, right? Where do you recalibrate? Where do you change things around? And what is your identity now that you have taken, a big loss, and not necessarily in the one where you're so outmatched, but a big loss because of the moment that it was for this showdown between these two incredible teams. You're looking at what anyone's legend decides, and they decide, yeah, we're going right back to that LPL style. We are going true to who we are and how we play and everything else. And you saw the comfort, I think, was the biggest factor for me in how they were playing and how familiar it looked, to looking back at, anyone's legend rolling through the playoffs, rolling through a double, best of 5 wins against a BLG squad. This is that anyone's legend that is the LPL champion, and seeing them function like this gives me high hopes for where they can, push this tournament in the lower bracket.
And now, deservedly so, those Panda Samurais sitting, chilling in the Zen Lounge, waiting the winners of the next match on the docket. FlyQuest versus BLG. Obviously, a lot of questions matchup-wise going into this one. BLG will and should be the favorites, but how are they rebounding after getting completely trashed by T1? Whereas FlyQuest, have they... It's tricky because they went into this G2 matchup, and you heard multiple of the players saying the biggest difference was G2's just not as good as anyone's legend. But I feel like they were extra locked in, having played a premier opponent. I hope playing a struggling G2 hasn't brought down their level, because that can't happen against BLG.
No, that one is an instant 3-0 for BLG if that is the level that FlyQuest is stepping in to the Vancouver Coliseum with that type of energy. It won't be enough. It won't be any type of test for the BLG team. And that's, again, assuming that this is going to be a BLG that is hungry, that is angry, that is a little ticked off because of the performance, because of the narratives and everything talking about them against T1, and maybe a little bit about how people are looking at FlyQuest as a legitimate threat, a legitimate option to dethrone, to derail this type of run for BLG in the lower bracket. Very much so looking at that type of side. I think the question is going to be, are you believing a little bit more into what you saw, right? Are you going off of what you saw in the matches of BLG and T1? Are you going off of what you saw in FlyQuest versus G2 and how you felt about both of those teams there? Or are you going more so off of the paper matchup, right? Where you're stacking up stats, names, champion pools, all these type of things. Because I think if you're going off of what you saw against G2, that type of form, and you're going off of BLG against T1, I think even understanding that BLG is going to have that bounce back, going to be hungry, angry, you're still, I think, looking at the form, the completion, the execution from FlyQuest in that G2 series and favoring it. But if you're going off of paper and you're starting to look into statistics and you're going off of the history that you have seen from these regions or players, you would be favoring a squad like BLG to make that type of fiery comeback at this event.
And obviously, there's always that unwritten mental hurdle that Western teams seem to have against both LPL and LCK squads. Although I will say it's usually worse against LCK squads. But not to say LTA has had much success against the LPL either. But there's two, I feel like, big matchups that are swayed either way in this matchup. And we start with that jungle one, which is the biggest advantage that you can give FlyQuest, because Inspired has continued that MVP form and been not just best Western, but one of the premier junglers at this entire event, and especially just in that series against T1. Beishuan did not have his best showing.
No, and I think a large part of that is on the individual, unfortunately, when you're looking on the side of BLG and where these errors are coming through and how you can envision what what you have to do to protect yourself against that happening with someone like Inspired, who is certainly going to be putting forth that type of effort. I think he was someone that I've really liked what I've seen from him so far at this event, except just the slightest small sliver of maybe some nitpicks that I might have with it, as far as some of these fights that are maybe looking a little bit more so, a little too much like solo queue, where you're going, oh, close, I almost had the guy, and your team's going, yeah, but you kind of left everyone else and you blew it because you were never going to get it. Blah, 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 blah. Anyways, the real story here is Inspired's got the skill set, he's got the champion pool, and I think he's got the support from the rest of FlyQuest to make that advantage be an advantage that is a pain point against BLG. I'm sure you're ready, because there is a counterpoint for BLG where they feel very strong and are extremely confident, and I think that starts very much so in the mid lane, looking at a player like Knight.
Yeah, that 100% is the swing the other way, the big advantage that BLG is having. And it's pretty mirrored, because Knight has had an incredible tournament. Even there were moments in that T1 series where he was finding angles. And I think Quad has been relatively underwhelming, despite, the general positive, I think, feeling everyone has had about FlyQuest. Quad hasn't even been at the level that we saw in the LTA playoffs, and he needs to, at bare minimum, be at that level in this matchup against Knight.
You're going to need those contributions, and that's not going to be just simply even, limiting what Knight is able to do within this series, within these games. You need to find a way to contribute, to be a factor for this FlyQuest squad, outside of the talk about Inspired and Whippo, and even in the top side, the two big veterans on this team. You can even look down into the bottom lane, issue a challenge to Masu and Busio. I think the 2v2 there, they can have their opportunities, even in to someone like Elk on the other side of BLG. But you got to be looking at that mid lane matchup of Quad into someone as established, as fantastic as Knight, and be a little bit worried if you are the FlyQuest side, given what you've seen and could expect from Quad at this event. If you are getting Quad towards the end of the run in the LTA, that is going to be someone that can contribute and can do some damage for this FlyQuest squad. Otherwise, I'm looking at that Knight advantage being that type of X factor, decisive advantage that can take you through a series.
Yeah, and obviously depends how much attention Inspired and Boosie are going to be throwing that mid lane if Quad does need a little bit of extra help. But no question, mid jungle are the two swaying sides for these matchups. But for me, what's the actual X factor? Because we'll say 1-1 on each side. If you look at mid jungle, we got to go top side, because these are two very different play styles from these guys that we've seen so far at this event. Obviously, we know Bin is split push king, gonna get a lane advantage, become an absolute menace, where when you look at the kill participation, Bwipo is just get me through the lane, get me in team fights, and making teleport plays around my team. And I mean, both of these are winning formulas for their respective squads, so it's really just which play style top lane is coming out ahead.
And I think, part of that, again, is going to be, as you mentioned, Bin really has that preference for that split push, that flank angle type of champion that really can be this make or break, game-changing moment situation, where on the other side, you are looking at more of a utility type of option from someone like Bwipo and what he can do. And that's not meant to say that he can't provide his own solo bolo action of a top laner.
As long as he's got a counter pick.
As long as he's got a counter pick and he's got you, close to the tower, sometimes you can pull something off. We've already seen at this event for that type of one. I think that this is going to be one of those matchups where it's all about, again, can Bwipo get enough help? Can he do enough on his own to survive until the point where it is team fight factor time, where it is that opportunity to help, to be this other role and objective within the team, as opposed to Bin. If Bin gets advantages, if he gets ahead, if you don't get that coverage from Inspired or whatever, then I'm a problem later in this game. And I'm a problem for you, and I'm a problem for Quad, I'm a problem for the bottom lane, I'm a problem for everybody on the side of FlyQuest in that situation if you're talking about Bin getting out of hand.
Obviously, FlyQuest, even if it's a competitive 4 or 5 game series, I think fans will probably be left feeling happy. But how much hopium do you have left in the tank for this series, Mark?
Oh, I'm emptying the tank. I'm going all in on FlyQuest for this.
But do you have enough left? You got 10%, 20% left?
Going to be the real question in this one, whether that true hopium copium is clouding what I know, what I believe to be the response we're going to see from BLG after the T1 loss. But I think that hopium, that copium, Inspired's angled in the jungle, maybe a little bit of cooking from Bwipo in the top side. And I do hope that we get Quad delivering, contributing the way that we had seen when FlyQuest became the champions of the LTA.
I feel like FlyQuest might get some magic and down feeling from BLG, courtesy of T1. So if they do win, I think they're thanking T1 after this one. But that is it today for League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you. Absolute beauties. Thanks so much for hanging out, and we'll catch you on that flippity flip.